Of stop and search by police could unintentionally be putting girls at greater risk in gangs. A report by the Centre for Social Justice, a think tank, and XLP, a charity, says female gang members are used to carrying drugs or guns because gangs know they're unlikely to be stopped. 3 years ago, following the riots in cities in England, the government introduced a strategy to combat gangs after learning that 1 in 5 of those arrested in London was a gang member. When XLP visits estates to work with those at risk of being caught up in violence, the youngsters always know it's coming. And here it is, the big purple bus, and it really is purple.
This is kind of where we have all the games. There's a PlayStation and an Xbox.
My name's Patrick Regan. I'm the CEO and founder of XLP. Girls are often used to carry weapons. Girls are often used to carry drugs. Girls are often used as retaliation. You hear about rape being used as a weapon. You see, these girls are incredibly vulnerable because if you have carried drugs and if you've got a baby, for instance, you're not going to go to the police because you don't want to be put away. You're not going to go to social services because you don't want to lose your baby. These girls are invisible to society. One of the only people that can solve this issue is the voluntary sector because we live in the communities we serve. And the girls trust us because we work in a completely relational way, which is long term. We're not disappearing after the next election.
Patrick's bus is aimed at preventing youngsters getting drawn in. Harder is helping those who are already part of gang life. In another area of London, I meet a young woman who says XLP has helped her to recover. As a teenager, she spent about 4 years as girlfriend of a gang member.
I was 14 years old. I got chatted up by somebody, and he was about 5 years older than me. Everything was nice at the beginning. He had money and he had a car. Basically, I didn't realise that he was associated in a gang. He introduced me to drugs, sex. I don't believe that I was physically and mentally ready at the time.
You were still a kid?
I was still a child. I started to sense control from him. He was focused on my phone calls, where I was going, who I said hello to. He asked me, why am I wearing this? Why am I looking like that? Constant accusations. I know that that was how he was trying to mould me into what he wanted me to be.
Did he involve you in what the gang was doing?
I was witnessing it, and he put me in danger.
This is quite hard to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah. There were so many times that, like, the red lights were sparking, and it was like I just couldn't come out. When I got hit in my face, that was a red light. When he started being violent towards me, it was like I couldn't leave. And when I should have left, and after a while, it became normal that this is how a girlfriend gets treated. And because I was young, it was my first relationship, so I didn't know any better. And I was raised by a single mum, no brothers, so I just had no clue about how men treated women.
They're involved with drugs. Were they also involved with weapons back then?
I never saw it face to face, but I know that they had that.
Did that worry you?
It did. But at the same time, it was like they were armed. These boys, they're the top boys. They're the in thing. I'm a part of something special.
Can you think of a point where you thought, actually, I need to get out of this? Is there a point where you kind of, the red lights were flashing and you really did think, I can't sort of pretend this isn't happening anymore?
I fell pregnant at 17. Through my pregnancy, I was very, very unhappy. And then when I was going to see my midwife and the health visitors, they knew that something was wrong. And they did a name check on him. They organised a meeting with the both of us. and they took out the report on him, and he got very, very angry in the room, and the social worker just looked at me to say, look at who you're having a child with. After I gave birth, within 2 weeks, he hit me so hard in my face that I basically blacked out. I saw stars. After that, that was it. I was gone. I knew exactly who to call. I phoned the social worker and I said, get me out. I cannot be in the area no more. I had to get out.
Well, she got out thanks to a midwife and social workers seizing the opportunity presented by her pregnancy. Today's report points to other such opportunities when gang members come into contact with the authorities, for example in hospital. One of the most controversial is when police use powers to stop and search them. Last summer, the Home Secretary Theresa May launched a consultation over the use of stop and search, although the government has yet to announce what changes it will make. Edward Boyd is from the Centre for Social Justice.
Of all of those that the police stop and search, 95% are male. And we've heard from former gang members how girls are asked more often to carry the guns, carry the drugs, because they are less likely to be stopped by the police and caught for carrying those items.
Is there a potential problem for the police, though, if they change that policy? If they started stopping girls and women routinely, presumably there is potential risk, particularly if those women or girls are young mums.
Absolutely, and one thing we're not calling for is the police just to go out and stop and search more girls. The solution isn't necessarily stopping more girls and gangs.
But it might be.
It could easily be, but on the flip side, you could say you just stop and search fewer men.
Overall then, what do you make of the police approach to the distinctive problem of girls in gang culture?
After the riots 3 years ago, the government rightly identified that they needed to better understand the problems that girls were facing within gangs. Yet 3 years later, we still know far too little. And what we're calling for is for government, for voluntary sector and everyone else to work together to better understand the problems that girls are facing within gangs and to support them to exit.
Greater Manchester Police have been doing some work on this, and you looked back at what they've done. What did you make of that?
We were told at the end of last year that Greater Manchester Police were leading work to identify which females were connected with which gang nominals and to produce a practical guide in order to help other forces tackle this problem.
Because this is a force with one of the biggest problems in the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some work has happened, but not nearly enough. And they should commit to finishing the mapping procedure by the end of next year so other police forces can take up and learn from what they've done and implement the procedure themselves.
Edward Boyd. Greater Manchester Police told us its work to identify how many girls are involved in gangs has now been incorporated into a wider initiative on tackling organised crime groups and families. When I spoke to Norman Baker, a Liberal Democrat who's the minister responsible for anti-gang measures at the Home Office, I asked first whether he was disappointed that Manchester's work hasn't yet been completed.
Well, I'm not aware that there's been a delay on that matter. There's work going on, as you say, in Greater Manchester. There's also work going on in the other areas where we've put funding in from the Home Office, over £1 million of funding. For example, for 13 Young People's Advocates, they also feed back information. And we're also working closely with others in the field, for example, the British Association for Sexual Health and HIV, to make sure sexual health professionals can identify vulnerable young people. So there are a number of ways in which we can collate information. As I say, we can't quantify it at the moment, and it would be wrong for me to guess, but what I do know is it's a problem, and it seems to me, sadly, to be getting worse.
But surely if you don't know the scale of the problem and the work that's supposed to be done to identify it is going at such a laggardly pace, it's very hard to know where you put the resources and how big the resources need to be.
Well, I'm not sure I accept that it's going at a laggardly pace. I will check on the Manchester model, but as far as I was concerned, that was proceeding quite satisfactorily. We've identified... The last
event was in October 2012, and it's now March 2014, and this practical guide for help for other forces has not appeared.
Well, there may be work behind the scenes. I will check that in the light of the suggestion from the Centre for Social Justice, if that's what they're saying, because clearly if it were the case that nothing very much had been done, that would be very worrying to me. But as I say, we have an updated strategy. We have got work going on in our 33 priority areas. The relevant police forces are continuing the mapping process, not just in Manchester but elsewhere as well. We've got work going on the ground with professionals, and indeed we're supporting innovative ideas such as the work with Red Thread at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington to get to people, and women and girls in particular, when they're at the most vulnerable, they've been subject to an assault perhaps, and we can get them out of the gang life.